Hello, this is Dr. Esa. So let's continue doing the Greek, and today we're going to look at the present and middle passive voice in Greek. So we're continuing with the verbs. So let's see what we can find. As we know, there are two different voices in English. There's an active voice and passive voice. In active voice, that the subject performs the action, as in this example. Peter sees the messenger. So Peter is the one who does the seeing here. And passive voice, subject is being acted upon. As in the example, the messenger is being seen by Peter. So this should be straightforward. However, in Greek, we have three different voices. We have the active and passive as in English, but we also have what is known as the middle voice. So in active, the subject performs the action. Here is an example in Greek, ho Petros blepei ton angelon. And as you can see in this example, ho Petros is in nominative case and is the subject of the action. So Peter is the one who sees blepei, and ton angelon in accusative. So that's the direct object of the sentence. Peter sees the angel or the messenger. Next, we have an example of passive. So subject is being acted upon by an agent. In Greek, angelos blepetai hypo tu Petru. So angel, and now you can see blepetai takes on a slightly different personal ending here. Blepetai and hypo, the agent or by, and Petru. Angelos blepetai hypo tu Petru. Angel is being seen by Peter. And then we have thirdly the middle voice, which is somewhat different from English, where subject participates in the action. Ho angelos blepetai. So the angel, and then we have the verb blepo, but in the form blepetai. The angel sees himself. And as you can see, that sounds like the reflexive type of verb in English. If you paid careful attention to the last two examples, you could see that in the passive and middle voice in Greek, they actually have the same form. In other words, they look exactly identical. So we would again need to use the context to determine whether that is a middle verb or a passive verb. So to form the middle and passive forms, which, like I said, are identical, we need the present stem, connecting vowel, and the middle passive endings. So it's quite simple. So we have our example verb luo. So we have the stem, then we have the connecting vowel omicron, and now you can see the middle passive endings look somewhat different. So luo mai, and this would be present, middle or passive, first person singular. I am losing myself would be the translation in middle, or I am being loosed would be the translation in the passive voice. And here you can see the chart from first, second, and third person singular and first, second, and third person plural in present middle voice. As you can see, the red indicates the personal ending. So lyomai, I am losing myself. Lue, you are losing yourself. Luetai, luometa, lueste, and luontai. Notice the second person singular has a rather complex contraction that actually brings about that second person singular ending, but you don't need to know the middle stages there. And here we see the chart of present passive voice verb, and as you can see, the endings are identical to the middle, but notice that the translation is I am being loosed or I am loosed. So there's really no difference in the way that the verb appears, but the translation is different. So we have to be careful as we look at the context whether the verb is actually in the middle voice or passive voice, because certainly it cannot be both of them at the same time. Now let's look at the function of the middle voice because it can be rather complicated at times. So middle has several shades of meanings, but let's look at the most common ones. So first one, the direct middle. It's what I alluded to earlier, the reflexive use. Perhaps we could say that is nearest to the basic idea if there's such a thing. So the Greek sentence ho anthropos egeiretai. So you can see here we have the etai ending that indicates to us that it is present, either middle or passive, but here we look at it as the middle voice. The man raises himself up. So this raising himself up, obviously himself up, is what makes it the middle translation and reflexive use. The next two are not as important. We have the reciprocal use. A plural subject engages in an interchange of action. Hoi anthropoi didaskontai. The men or the people are teaching one another. And again, to highlight the ending that demonstrates that it is passive or middle, and here we would translate it as middle. And reciprocal, meaning that teaching one another. We have indirect middle. The subject is acting with reference to itself or on behalf of itself. Lambanetai Dora. She is taking for herself gifts, or he is taking for himself gifts. And again, this ending of the verb helps us identify as the middle or passive, and here we interpret as middle, and we interpret it as indirect middle, where subject is acting with reference to itself or on behalf of itself. Perhaps these two examples are not so easy to understand, but once we look at the Greek sentences within a context, they would give us some clues how to understand and interpret and translate the sentences. Then we have what is known as intensive middle. The stress is on the agent producing the action. In other words, it would be stressing and emphasizing the one who is doing the action. Didasketai, notice the ending. Didasketai ten aletheian. He himself is teaching the truth. So it is emphasizing that it is he who teaches and nobody else. Of course, in this situation, it would be possible to use the regular present active, didaske ten aletheian. He is teaching the truth, but the middle would emphasize and make it intensive. This next usage of middle is very important. It's called the deponent or defective middle. So defective or deponent middle is in form middle, but active in function. In other words, there are certain verbs that only can be found in the middle voice, and we call them deponent verbs. So here's one example, erkomai ektes eklesias. I come from the church. So you can see that omai is the regular middle passive ending, and here would interpret it as middle. But as a matter of fact, there is no verb of this sort that would have the regular active ending. So whenever you have the verb erkomai, come or go, it would always be found in the middle voice, or we would call it a deponent verb. So deponent always looks like passive middle, always active in meaning. Recognition, check the lexical form, and again, if you would see this particular type of verb in your vocabulary or textbook or lexicon, you would always see this as in the deponent or middle form. There's no active form of this verb available at all. always listed with passive or middle ending. So as you parse this sort of a verb like erkomai, you would parse it either as middle or you could just write deponent. Either one is fine. So then we have the function of the passive voice, and there are 4 distinct uses of the passive in Greek, and they're really not quite that distinct because the verb remains exactly the same. It's just a matter of which preposition we're using in association with the verb. So we have the direct agent, which is the most common usage in the New Testament, where we use the preposition hypo with the genitive case. So didasketai hypo tu angelu. So you can see that there's the etai ending that helps identify the verb as middle or passive, and here it is passive, and it is followed by the preposition hypo, by. So he is being taught, or he is taught by the angel. So the translation is very straightforward. So next we have what is known as the intermediate agent. So we're using preposition dia with the genitive. Panta di autu e geneto. And again, here we have the eto ending to help us recognize the verb as middle or passive. So all things through him were made. So here we have the preposition dia. You see that elision of the last alphabet alpha. So don't be confused by that. And the point here is that Christ is the intermediate agent and God the Father is the original agent of creation here. Then third, we have the impersonal agent where we use the preposition en, or sometimes it can be the dative case without the preposition at all. Hoi anthropoi so jontai ento logo tu messiu. And you can see here again, ontai. Here is the verb ending from sojo, to save or rescue. The men or the people are being rescued by the word of the Messiah. And finally, we have a situation where there's no agent at all. And we can just have a verb, for example, in the third person singular, egeiretai. So you can see that the ending would indicate to us, and obviously this is a third person singular, he is being raised up. Obviously, most of the time would have a context that would help us decipher what is really being talked about, as opposed to just having that one word in isolation as here.